I'm Patrick Smith. What was your name, sir?
Adele Weiss, Weiss and Associates.
Weiss and Associates. And what do you do?
We specialize in the federal income tax to help people understand, Americans, nationals, people that are born in the constitutional republic, or the 50 states of the union is what most people think of, to look at the law and actually make a choice whether they want to continue to be in that jurisdiction where they're filing and paying, or they choose to exercise their option provided by Congress to leave the U.S. tax club.
An option provided by Congress to leave. So would you say, when he snagged me when we were walking through the hall, he said that you think that I have somehow voluntarily opted into the tax system. Is that your position?
If you filed your first Form 1040, you have made what the IRS refers to as a voluntary election. Now, when you do that, you do it under the pretense they don't give you full disclosure. They don't warn you about what you're doing and the ramifications of it. But that filing of your first Form 1040 converts you out of your status as someone born in the constitutional republic, which cannot be taxed. The Constitution doesn't allow it, and I can go into more in detail on that. But what happens, they identify you as an as a U.S. resident alien. Now, all U.S. resident aliens are taxpayers. There's no doubt. So a U.S. resident alien might be somebody from France, China, Brazil, wherever, coming into the 50 states or D.C. to work and live.
This sounds like, and I don't say this to be insulting at all, it just sounds like, you know, I've heard a lot of people say that if we say these certain magic words or cast these certain magic spells that will somehow be exempted from the extortion that is taxation. So first of all, like, I don't see filing a 1040. The IRS might see it as me opting in, but I certainly don't think that's a voluntary thing. Like, they don't have, because I file a 1040, I'm not consenting to be taxed. I'm doing that under duress. They might think so, right?
When you file a Form 1040, technically you are making a voluntary election, because under 26 CFR 1.871-1 little a, if you can believe all that nomenclature, you are identifying yourself as a U.S. resident alien in their eyes. You're granting them permission, because it says in this regulation that you may elect to have your income treated, meaning taxed, as if you were a U.S. resident alien. So you leave the status of protection from any obligation for the federal income tax in the jurisdiction, the 50 states of the Union. You're now over here in the District of Columbia. If you read the wording of the 16th Amendment, they omitted any inclusion to the rule of apportionment. Now, this is a fancy way of saying they look at census, prorate all the different people in different states of the Union, and they send the bill, if there was a bill, to the state legislature so they could collect the funds and send them on to the government. The Constitution doesn't allow the government to put a direct tax on any American. There's two types of taxes, direct and excise tax. Some people call it indirect. But the excise taxes are on products like ATF issues. But the manufacturers pay that. And then the manufacturers build in the cost of that tax into their product. So indirectly, you're paying that tax. The excise tax is a one-time tax on the state legislatures, and it's never on the people.
So how do we get out?
Well, the revocation of election was established by the U.S. Congress. It's right in the Internal Revenue Code, 6013 G4A. It shows that Americans, which we call American nationals, we don't use the term U.S. citizen because it's confusing, because the government uses the term U.S. citizen to identify those that are born in territories such as Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, and so forth. We don't like to use their same nomenclature because they call the District of Columbia the United States and the U.S. territories states of the United States. But that's the same thing the Constitutional Republic does. So we're trying to draw a line of demarcation mentally so that people don't go around with this confusion look on their face all the time. So the U.S. Congress has provided this option, not us. We're not, in fact, we're pro-government. I mean, we're saying the Constitution, if they form their activities around the Constitution, there's no issue. And the federal income tax was designed only to be applied to that one jurisdiction. Now, most people say, well, how can that be? If you look at the Supreme Court decision in 1895, the Pollock decision, Farmers Loan and Trust was the other part of it, they actually omitted or admitted the fact that the direct tax could only be levied upon inclusion of the rule of apportionment. Read the 16th Amendment and it completely omits the rule of apportionment. Now, If Congress can write a law, such as an amendment to the Constitution, and negate the Supreme Court decision, do we really need the Supreme Court? We now have just 2 branches of government instead of 3.
So how do we get out? Like, how do I no longer file income tax from now on?
First thing you do is you look at this section 6013 G4A, like I mentioned. You need to prove it to yourself. We have all this information on our website so that people can go through it, but it's not a casual subject either. So once you decide you want to move forward, you have to meet our 8 strict criteria, because if you're a U.S. taxpayer and you work for the government or something like that, we ask you to kindly leave our website. We're not anti-government. We say actually the federal income tax is perfectly legal for the jurisdiction in which it was created for. But the confusion is all the nomenclature. They use the same words of art to confuse people. Now the U.S. Congress granted the American people that were brought in by propaganda, file their first Form 1040. There was no full disclosure. There's no willful and knowing intent. Look at tobacco products today. There's warning labels all over the place. There's nothing provided by the government to say, look, if you file this first Form 1040, here are the ramifications of what you're doing to yourself.
So we'll definitely mention your website and the resources that for the people that want more information on what you're saying are at the end. But I guess I'm still unclear. Is it like is it a piece of paper I send them with some special magic law spells on it that make them ignore me, or? No,
there's no magic. It's actually law. Yeah. See, my word counts for nothing.
I call those magic spells.
Okay. The law is what we use to our advantage, because see, that's the structure. Without law, it's just lawlessness, really. And
do you know what conference you're at?
Yes. I'm trying to be polite here. Okay. So,
yeah, sure.
But the key is I created an 11-page document called the Revocation of Election. I have a letter from the IRS admitting it's a universal acceptance, because when they accepted it on one of our clients and sent you are out of the U.S. Tax Club type agreement, it's universal with all of ours, because they referenced my particular labeling for this revocation of election process.
So you have a person out there in the world that has done this and no longer pays taxes?
We've got 4,000 clients.
And how many of them are in prison right now?
None.
Really? Okay.
It's the law again. I mean, what can they do? I mean,
they can ignore their law. And I think I can point to some precedent of them doing that.
If the Constitution is dead, then we're all up the creek.
The Constitution is dead.
But
we're all up the creek.
Well, I'm looking at it the other way. I'm hopefully saying that if you follow the structure that we're doing here, you can literally follow the guidelines provided by the U.S. Congress to exercise your option to leave the U.S. Tax Club. And the Congress guarantees you this, and when the IRS sees that, they can't do anything, because they're not able to interpret the law themselves. They have to abide by it.
I think that this conversation warrants a lot more time than I have for it today. Would you be willing to come on my show remotely at another time?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll get your contact information, we'll pick it up. But for now, can you kind of tell the viewers where to find you and your information? Sure.
Our website is weissparis.com. We're based out of Western Europe, and our email address is bilateral@gmx.com. And everything we do is based on the law, and we're here to help American nationals that want to exercise their option to leave the U.S. Tax Club. And it's a process that works and has worked for over 4,000 clients.
Bold claims that I look forward to following up on. Thank you very much for talking to me today.
Thank you for your time.